Good afternoon, everyone. Alison, where are you? There. What a fantastic talk. Thank you. It's just, I always feel like we need 5 minutes of just quiet reflection. That was very profound, and I thank you too for validating how I'm feeling right now. So we're going to be, Jane, who's sitting here, and I will be talking about some work at Birkbeck that happened a year or so ago. First, actually, I just wanted to say thanks to Brian and Claire and the team that have put this event together. And over the years, it's just, I don't know, it just seems to go on as a fantastic event, but community as well, you know, picking up on what Alison was saying about the culture of things and that culture that Brian and Claire have created. It's a really special thing. You know, you don't see that at other events and other conferences. So I just wanted to applaud that. So yeah, we're going to be talking about customer journey mapping, something that I think others are also talking about this conference. First, a few quick facts about me. So I'm one of the founders of an agency called Headscape. We set up in 2002. My colleagues, Marcus Lillington, who's sat there, and Paul Berg, I don't know if he's here yet. I think he's still on his way. We set it up in 2002. We met actually in a .com, and we'd worked together for a year and a bit in a .com that did the thing that all decent .coms did, and in January 2002 it exploded spectacularly, spitting us out, jobless. And 2 weeks later, Headscape was born. The other quick fact is that I'm not entirely of the dark side. I was actually a member of staff in the School of Electronics and Computer Science at the University of Southampton for 10 years, way back a little while ago. Anyway, enough about me. Here's what we're going to cover. So, some general stuff about user journey mapping, how it works, good things to do, what not to do. Then I'd like to get into some detail of a specific journey that we mapped with Birkbeck. And then I'll pass over to Jane to make sense of it all. Okay? And I ask you to bear with me for the next few slides, because before I talk about users and journey mapping and so on, I want to start by thinking a bit about brand. I'm slightly nervous with the head of marketing sat right in front of me. But why do I want to talk about brand? It's because I think user journeys are, to a large extent, stories of how users interact with brands. What's brand? Brand is, you know, it's a construct that conveys attributes of a product or a service or an organization. Before digital came along, brand was communicated mainly at a distance. So it might, for example, have been communicated through an image. And here's an image that's a very powerful one of a guy called Blackbeard. You might have seen this image before. It's quite widely used image when pirates are talked about. And in the spirit of competitions, I've got a little competition for you. I didn't know there were going to be all these competitions, so you've somewhat stolen my thunder. But anyway, right, are you ready? The first person who can tweet with the IWMW 18 hashtag the actual name of Blackbeard, see me at the end, to win a veritable treasure trove of doubloons and pieces of 8. So get on there quickly. First up wins that treasure trove. Okay, so Blackbeard cultivated this fantastic image. Staring eyes, long beard, of course, the smoking ends, a couple of muskets there ready for action. The sophisticated Blackbeard took things a step further forward. And what he did was develop this flag. We might call it a logo. And he did that to communicate his brand promise. It's pretty clear what his brand promise was. He promised terror, death, destruction. I think that probably sums it up pretty succinctly. And I think users of Blackbeard's service were typically not repeat customers. You know, they weren't going to come back after a dose of the treatment they'd have got from Blackbeard. Fortunately, you know, for most seagoers, they only got that experience if they actually encountered him on the high seas. But I think it's a great example of a brand in action. Just, you know, put yourself in the place of some seafarer, seeing the flag, this logo coming over the horizon, and the fear that would have struck. Just think how much more fearful you might be if you've heard the rumors and the stories around the port or on the ship. In a digital age, it brings that whole brand experience closer to the user. It's there all the time, it's everywhere, it's with users persistently. I guess if Blackbeard were around now, he'd have a YouTube channel, he'd have social media feeds, he'd have a game franchise. You know, he was a sophisticated guy, he'd have all that stuff. We can learn from pirates in other ways too. What else do pirates do well? Well, of course, they're well known for map making. Just, you know, bear with me for one more slide through this pirate stuff. Here's your typical pirate map. X marks the spot where the treasure is, of course. But note the dotted line, it's the journey. And that's what I think we're interested in here. So we're interested in making that journey as simple as possible so that anyone following it can avoid the swamps, the elephant traps, the rampaging marauders, whatever hazards there are along the way. So we're not just dealing with pirates. You aren't dealing in looting and pillaging and destruction, or at least not all the time. But those of you in HE are dealing with users' experiences just as much, in fact, more so. And I think from a brand perspective, we can sum up one big difference between you and Blackbeard as follows. And I think this is really important, that your brand is no longer what you say it is as an organization. It's what your users are saying it is. And that, I think, is really key. So in this digital age, it's your brand is what your users are saying it is. Okay, so you've got many users, many audiences. The people in those audiences are journeying with you. They've got a huge range of different interactions, of perceptions, of thoughts, of expectations about your organization. The emotion stuff that Alison was talking about. With Blackbeard, it was pretty simple. It was fear, or fear and destruction. That was about it. For you and your organizations, it's far, far more complicated. So shouldn't we be seeking to understand and model those journeys that your users are taking? Shouldn't we be seeking that in understanding if we're going to serve those users well, if we're going to encourage them to tell others good things about your organization, if we're going to continue to engage with them over the longer term? I think you owe it to your users to understand and empathize with them. So all of these perceptions, these thoughts, these expectations, they change with time, but they also depend on the different contacts that users have with your brand. So let's call those contacts in the jargon touch points. And touch points can be direct, so it might be someone coming to your website, it might be someone calling a helpline or inquiry line, it might be someone making an open day booking, whatever, or it can be indirect, it can be someone talking about your organization in social media, for example. I think what's important to realize is that every interaction, there's an opportunity for you to win or for you to lose. And there's an opportunity to win by influencing what the user's experience is, to influence what they think, their perceptions, whether they are going to go on to achieve a goal or complete a task, to feel positive about you, to make a good recommendation, to take action. I think the flip side is the downside with digital. You know, in Blackbeard's days, you might have known a dozen or 2 dozen people. What's the average number of friends on Facebook now? 300 plus, probably. So you can reach with negative comments huge audiences. So the potential downside is huge. It's well illustrated by a story that some of you might have heard from British Airways from a number of years ago. A customer had their baggage lost. So they took out a promoted tweet that evening because they were so incensed. The tweet read, "Don't fly at British Airways, their customer service is horrendous." That's what happened. There was a bit of a Twitter storm over it. British Airways at the time, and I think this was 2013, they only monitored social media during 9 to 5 business hours. So they had the complete overnight. When the storm raged, they came into the office in the morning only to discover they had a PR disaster on their hands. And it was because they didn't understand that scenario in a customer journey with a customer who'd lost their baggage. And I think that comes on to this question of the big picture. And it's one of the real advantages of this technique called user journey mapping. Helping an organization to assemble a common big picture of user journeys. And I think in many, and probably most organizations, there's no big picture of the users and their journeys with you. I think it's something that's often ignored in UX design and digital development because everything is kept narrow and just on digital rather than looking at the bigger picture. There are many departments, many functions in your organization that have got a stake in relationships with your users. And it's hard to get them together. It's not an easy thing. It takes intentional effort to get them together and to do that common learning. But if you are putting out inconsistent messages or you're providing inconsistent service to your users, then these accidents can happen and the ripples, the consequences can carry a long way. Okay, so what's the challenge? The challenge is twofold, I think. We want to design great, consistent user experiences, consistent across not just digital, but that extend beyond digital. And we also want to ensure that there's deep, sustained understanding of users and their journeys across an organization. So how might we meet those challenges? Well, we might think of doing things like good internal comms, or of talking to lots of stakeholders. What I'm suggesting, what Jane and I are suggesting from our experience, is that there's a better way, there's a method, there's a technique to use, and it's called journey mapping. So what is this mapping then? Let me briefly describe and if you like, break it down into its component parts. So firstly, I say that it's a foundation for good user experience design. The outputs from user journey mapping feed into the design of better processes, better user interfaces, better user experience. So it's a kind of bridge between user research and the design processes. So moving on to the Birkbeck case study, let's look at what we did there and the process that we went through. So we started off with some user research. What we did was we did one-to-one interviews with a whole load of students. We did some small group workshops with students. And all of that fed into the process, and Jane will talk about the results shortly. But let's look at the anatomy of a user journey. So here's a timeline. Pretty simple. Not much to say about that. The next stage is to identify key events. So let's look at the situation for prospective, mature postgraduate students at Birkbeck. So we came up through a process of workshopping with these 5 key events. And so from the left, we've got an awareness of Birkbeck. Then in the journey, the prospective student decides, okay, Birkbeck is one of my options. Then they reach that decision point, decision to apply. They receive an offer, and then they go on to enrollment. So that's the ideal journey. Actually, there's an important sideline on that journey, and that's the one where a student goes through as far as the decision to apply, they make an application, and they get a rejection. Each of these key events defines the endpoints of a stage. And so we look to those stages, and each of those stages is characterized by a set of questions and tasks that a user might have. And we spent time, again, in workshop situations, figuring out what key questions and tasks users would have. So, for example, in initial research, it might be, does Birkbeck offer a course that I'm interested in? For a mature prospective postgrad, it might be, am I able to go back studying? Can I afford it? As you go on to the detailed research, it might be things like, can I combine study and work? How many days a week? What's the timetable? Because Birkbeck offers mostly its teaching in the evenings. So what are the user journey mapping workshops like? Well, it's hands-on stuff. The guys in this picture look so intense that they've forgotten to smile. Hard at work, good to see. But yeah, you see in the background on the wall a grid of stages, and then broken down into the different component parts of the journey map. And each workshop session generates a lot of post-its, as any workshopping exercise needs to do. What's interesting here is, so you generate, what we're doing is, in this particular example, generating tasks for the in-depth research stage of the journey. So we've had a small group generate a set of post-its for a bunch of tasks. Then we've had everyone in the workshop do some voting. So that's the tally marks, and that's really important because you start to build up this picture of the priorities and importance of different activities and different tasks. So you do that treatment for every element in the grid. We also analyze feelings and emotions, and as Alison was talking about, a really important aspect of understanding the user journey is understanding their feelings and emotions. So we see here that in the early stages, you've got building hunger for information. What we found with prospective postgraduates is this uncertainty about being able to study and a lack of confidence that was really a really important element. And finances, of course, were a very important element there as well. And once it moved on to the application process, there was when people needed help, they needed help fast, but they were motivated to push through, highly motivated once they got to that point of a decision to apply. Analyzing touch points gives you what it generates is a list of, almost a checklist really, that you can use to look at who owns the checkpoints, what you need to coordinate across the organization. Finally, we looked at weaknesses that Birkbeck had, and we looked at opportunities. I won't go into these, and Jane will talk about some of those more. So you've seen the different layers, the anatomy, really, of a journey map. And the final thing that we did was to assemble those into something that could be used as a poster at Birkbeck. And it sits on the walls at Birkbeck. It's not intended to be absolutely comprehensive. It doesn't include everything, but it includes key points. And the idea is that it triggers the memories of the people who are involved in the process, so that they're continually referring back to what they did when they went through that journey mapping. And that addresses this sort of sustained, it's not a report that goes into a drawer, it's a sustained representation of the user journey map. And here's one example from the project with Birkbeck. So I have one last slide. Jane's going to talk about some of the implications for web. I just wanted to finish up by talking about some of the other broader impacts, coming back to this issue of the big picture. And what we found was that there was an impact from having done this process that cut across quite a lot of functions and departments within Birkbeck. It provided input into several process review projects addressing the whole set of issues around the inquiries and help processes, around application status information that's provided to prospective students, about streamlining enrollments, and about getting timetable information out to people earlier. So, thinking about Birkbeck again, a lot of people who go to Birkbeck are working people, and they work during the day and study at night. And knowing their timetables before they enroll is a really important thing, we discovered. And so one of the things that Birkbeck is seeking to do is to develop timetables earlier in the annual cycle so they can get those out to prospective students. So, sorry Jane, I've overrun by a few minutes. All yours.
Okay, thanks.
And don't forget, whoever's the winner, I don't know if we've got a winner, but the treasure trove is there.
I'm just going to eat those now. So I'm Jane. Hi. Thank you very much to Brian and Claire for inviting me. I am a newbie, so this is my first talk at IWMW. But I did want to say, just reflecting on what Alison said, a lot of what Alison said chimed with me, and it really struck home. I think I've been working on the web probably around as long as Alison, and a lot of that, the political stuff, all that kind of stuff, absolutely spot on. And also I would say I did a talk with Alison about 10 years ago when you were at Bath. No idea about any of those things. So, go ahead, fake it to make it. That totally works. Totally with it. So I just want to say hi to my Birkbeck lot who are there. Just hi. Anyway, let's crack on, because I'm aware that I'm standing between you and the coffee break. Are you guys okay? Right. Hold on. Okay, so I'm Jane Van Ben. I'm Web Content Manager for Birkbeck. Been at Birkbeck a very long time, since 2001. I've been working on the Birkbeck web since 2004. I've done 2 Birkbeck MA degrees. I met my partner at Birkbeck. I don't have a Birkbeck tattoo, but people think I do. Birkbeck, for those who don't know about it, Birkbeck is unique. It's a really amazing institution. It's London's evening university, and what that means is all of our courses are taught in the evening, with a few exceptions, but it's sort of the other way to other universities. Founded in 1823 in a pub, it's a proper London university, and in 1830 Birkbeck became one of the first colleges to admit women to students, so it's progressive, forward-thinking. In 1920, Birkbeck joined the University of London on the understanding that we continue to teach in the evenings. And then in 2012, which was a bit of a shock to the system, we started offering full-time undergrad courses for the first time because we were known as part-time evening study. And so for the first time, we were in the UCAS process, which was a shock. We normally had adults coming to our open evening, and they were the ones who were doing the courses, and then they brought their kids along to complain. So when we first saw kids coming to an open evening and they were the ones who still wanted to study, it was unheard of. Anyway, Birkbeck's a proper institution, got a silver tap, high scores in ref, and obviously that's really important. Oops, I've just gone through a couple. So about our web, that slide was just telling you that people continue to visit our website. I know they always ask, the numbers are big enough for us not to be concerned about. The numbers keep going up. You can't really compare it because Google Analytics changes what it measures, so we're not concerned about that. Our students are amazing. That was the other slide that I just skipped through. Our students are anyone. So our students go from 18 to 80 now. I think actually we had a graduate at our last graduation ceremony who was in her late 80s. She just finished an LLB. I don't know what she wanted to do with it, but she just was amazing. And we also have 18-year-olds who come straight from school because we have full-time undergraduate study where they study in the evening 4 evenings a week. We have no idea why they are studying at Birkbeck, but they're coming to us. And so the Birkbeck audience is wide, and our market is incredible. They're really complex, but what they all share is they have a Birkbeck attitude, which is that they're really, really committed to studying, and they're really committed to getting their degrees and doing whatever it is they want to do with their lives. So Birkbeck really enables people to achieve their ambitions. So thinking about the web, since 1996, we've had 6 iterations of our homepage, so including an increasing number of redeveloped pages. So Birkbeck, like every other website, I think has sprawled across the internet. So now it's close to 100,000 content items. We don't know what all of that is, which is worrying. So the first one, 96, going back in time, this was our first website, 2003, 2007, getting a bit bigger, 2008, and then 2010, we went for our first long page. So I was involved with this from the blue one, from 2007, that was my first home page. Prior to that, they didn't really have a content person involved. 2010, this latest one, was the first one where people didn't actually complain to us nonstop. They complained, but they didn't complain as much as all the previous ones. So that was a big step forward. 2016, we launched the Digital Transformation Project, which is a grand title for a web redevelopment project. It's not actually a digital transformation project. We're not totally transforming the digital landscape at Birkbeck. It really is a web project, but we really like the title, so we went with it. That was launched in 2016. We had project objectives, which was to ensure that our website reflected our new visual ID. So Birkbeck's almost 200 years old. We never had a visual ID until last year. This is it, the picture. That is what our visual ID is. People at Birkbeck don't like it. Some people do, but, you know, they go on about the colors. I like the colors. I don't know what that's all about. Anyway, image heavy, specific palette of colors. Another objective, really important, was to support recruitment onto Birkbeck courses. Because we're so new in UCAS, Birkbeck basically gets its students by advertising, word of mouth, not really the conventional routes. We get a lot of non-traditional students who have heard about us through other routes. So Birkbeck really, recruitment is, you know, we were really the ones who advertised on the London Underground before anyone else. Now it's all, now everybody advertises on it, but for a while, we were the only ones who were doing it because everyone else was in UCAS. So the other thing we had to do was we needed to convert the whole Birkbeck website into responsive design. I don't know, many of you were around when Google Armageddon hit. a few years ago. There was a big panic at Birkbeck about that one. People were screaming at us, "What are you going to do?" We went, well, it's kind of a big ship to turn around, but we are going to turn it into responsive design. We also had to ensure that the web works for everyone, including people with accessibility requirements, and get rid of duplicate, out-of-date, and poor content. And that, from my point of view, is the big objective. So my team is the content team. There's only 3 of us. We work very closely with the technical team. But from my point of view, we have got to get rid of that really bad content because it's a luxury we no longer have. Digital roadmap, very briefly. Stage 1, we were given the deadline before we actually knew what the project was. That really focused the mind. So by May 2017, we did the customer journey mapping. Delighted about customer journey mapping, by the way. It's something I knew about and we'd never had the budget to do it. So to actually have the budget and the commitment to do it was amazing. Develop a new web design for which we used an agency called Pentagram, and then web build stage 1, which was the May 2017 deadline, was apply the new design for a homepage, all our course listings, and various other critical pages. And so, part of the Birkbeck landscape, but not the majority of it. So the customer journey mapping, this is the meat in the sandwich for this thing, is what did we learn? We learned loads. So it was really, what we found is it's hard to find important information. For a website where your course information is the most important information on your website, this first thing was a bit of a shocker, that it's problems with course finding. So we had to do something about that. Bursaries and scholarships, not easy to find that information. For Birkbeck students, that's incredibly important. A lot of people are mature students, and they can't actually do our degrees unless they get a bursary or scholarship. So for us to keep that information hidden from them is kind of mean. Student service information, so that again was really hard to find all over the place, and also the content was maintained by about 85 people. So we had this terrible, terrible website which had our student service information, and we found that 85 people had access to it, and it was 1,500 pages. The financial support information itself was about 200 pages on its own. A lot of that was out of date. I mean, that's not great. And it was at a time when we first sort of worked on that years ago, there was no other information about part-time funding in 2012. Birkbeck website was the only place you could really find it because we preceded the government in presenting that information because it was more of a priority for us than it was for them. So for us, for financial support information is really, really important on our website. Something else, which was a bit of a blow. So all of our courses are taught in the evening. And the research that was done by Headscape said that people didn't know that teaching was in the evenings. And so they showed up at our courses and went in the daytime and went, "Where are your daytime courses?" And we went, "You're going to have to hang around here till 6 in the evening because that's when the course is." And sorry about that, that is a bit of a shock because you have no evenings. You're studying at Birkbeck. I mean, that is a big, big thing. In terms of managing expectations, I think perhaps we failed. So our website, we thought, well, it is something. We're going to have to do something about that. That's not the only thing about Birkbeck that wasn't always clear. Headscape told us that we're hiding our light. It's not easy to find out how Birkbeck does in national and international rankings. We're kind of late to a lot of rankings because of the not full-time undergraduate thing. Birkbeck traditionally was not in rankings. It wasn't an issue for us. Some international rankings were because it was postgrad, but at undergrad, we weren't. So when we are in rankings, we'd like that, and we're doing well, we'd like people to find that information, but we didn't make that easy either. So National Student Survey 2016, and I know people have issues about the National Student Survey, but nonetheless, our students do look for it, is we had top scores UK-wide for various sorts of things, #1 in London for economics and English. And we asked students, did you know any of that when you applied? And they didn't, because we didn't tell them about it. Or if we did tell them, it was on a department website, on a paper that an academic submitted that nobody ever downloaded. Something else, Chris touched on this, practical details really matter before enrollment, and just in the interests of full disclosure, we haven't sorted out the timetable issue. People are still getting their timetables the week before they start. So that's not something that has been fixed. It's something that we've been aware of. We are on a journey in relation to these things, but we haven't sorted it out, and that's for systematic reasons. Course handbooks, really important. Reading lists, really important. Birkbeck students are very keen. They want to do some studying in the summer before they actually start, and we didn't make that information available. So all of these things went into our thinking. Another thing about Birkbeck students is very, very often at a Birkbeck open evening, a student will come up to us and they'll say, I just don't know if I can do it. I haven't been in education for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. I haven't done it. I don't know if I can actually do it. So there's a lack of confidence. And then conversely, what we have is young students coming along going, I don't want to be the only young person in the class. I just don't know if I can do it. So we're hearing the same anxiety from different students and, not so sure about their study skills, etc. We made it impossible for them to find that information as well. I mean, I think we did a really good job on making it really hard for them to find it. So we know the ones who are actually studying with us are really amazing because they managed to find all that information and start with us. Other findings, talking to Birkbeck staff can be transformative for our students. So once they got off our website, if they actually managed to find a human being who could answer their questions, that was them converted. Now you can imagine it wasn't that, it doesn't happen all the time. People have the converse experience, which is that if they meet people who don't answer their questions, and at the time our front-facing student service area really didn't answer a lot of questions, they then weren't converted, and quite the opposite, they went elsewhere. So that was really, really helpful, and really helpful for us to feed back to Birkbeck staff. Our website's really important to prospective students. They told us that they visited it hundreds of times over 2 to 3 years. I don't know what the decision-making timescale is for other students, but for Birkbeck it's about 3 years for traditional students to decide that they're going to study at Birkbeck. And then our students worked really hard to find the information they need, so we didn't make it easy for them. So the next step in this journey for us, and it really was that we should have a web design. So the web design process was a meeting between Chris, and I have to say thank you to Chris because he sat in our basement and interviewed students for I don't know how many evenings when it was really dark because it's an evening study institution, and we would just leave him there. So that was really nice. It was really great. We were really grateful for that. But the development of the design, we met with Pentagram, CJM researchers to understand the problems. We had 3 meetings. The design concept was agreed, and a style guide was developed by the designers who gave it to us so that it could be implemented by our technical team, the head of which is up there. The agency came up with these web design guidelines, and for us they were quite radical. So this was very, very different to what our website looked like when we first went and talked to them. Simplify and clear away clutter. We had a structure, and we still have, because we're still in the process of redeveloping our website. If you get onto the Birkbeck website and you throw a stone, you're going to hit a page that has 3 columns. The right-hand side tends to have extra stuff in it, and what our students told us is it looked like advertising. It looked like clutter. It just looked like clutter. We had student profiles in our right-hand column because everybody said they're really important to our students. Our students never looked at them because they thought it was an ad. So get away from clutter, push up the content, reduce the steps to get to the information, connect the content, surface a story on every landing page. So not on every page, but our news and events was only available really from our homepage. It wasn't available anywhere else, so we wanted to make that available elsewhere. Create hierarchy, flatten the hierarchy actually was what we did, and then don't be afraid of long pages. So one of the projects we had was the study skills information, where we had 1,000 plus content pages, 1,200 files. We reduced that to 100 content pages and 56 files. So that's our student service information now. And it's so much easier. Basically, within 3 months of going live with this website, we had more page views in this area of our content, even though it was a fraction of the information that we previously had. We had more engagement, and overall we knew that people were finding the information they wanted because they were asking the right questions. Our new homepage. So this big hero images, big pictures, very dramatic change from any of our previous homepages. And I have to say, when we went live with this, we did get some really great feedback, I have to say, even from academics, which was pretty much unprecedented. But we also got feedback from people who absolutely loathed this. And I don't want to be ageist, but they were older than 50. So these people really, really hated this design. And we had an email from a head of one of our schools saying, okay, in effect, he said, right, the joke's over. Could we revert back to the real homepage? And so, I don't think any of us answered that because we were so flabbergasted. We just thought, we don't know how to tell you this. We just redeveloped the whole thing. And another thing, research. They said it's too recruitment focused. I don't know if you get this sort of feedback from your academics. They said Yeah, you know, we're a university. We should be talking about research. This looks like you're just interested in recruitment. And we are really interested in recruitment. So on the top bar, you can see it says research. We actually put that in just to keep them quiet, and it has worked to some extent. That's on mobile, obviously responsive. Another thing is, just very quickly, is I was at a leaving do, and somebody told me that the big image at the top was too big for the screen, for her screen. And I thought, I don't know what you mean. I said, what do you mean? She said, it's just too big for the screen. I said, I don't know what you mean. It's too big for the screen. She doesn't fit on my screen. I said, it should fit on your screen. Anyway, in the end, it just turned out she didn't like the big image. She thought everything should be above the fold. So this is the kind of conversations that we've been having, but nonetheless, we know it is working for us. Statement tiles. This is not radical at all, but honestly, this has made a big difference to people finding out about us. So we have statement tiles on our landing pages telling you something about Birkbeck. It's just a statement. It takes you off to another part where people can find out more information. But we didn't previously have this, so for us, this was quite radical. And that came directly out of the customer journey mapping, addressing that concern about the no light under the bushel. Something else is, we've put news events and blogs, podcasts. We didn't have access to blogs or podcasts on our website anywhere before. We've now put them all over the place. So on all of our landing pages, you can get access to this kind of spread. And it means that prospective students are looking at our news and events more than they actually did before. They're also looking at our courses, which is where we expect them to be, but they are also looking at this. Other changes that we made as a result of the customer journey mapping, and it really was transformative. It's informed so much of what we've done, is we introduced new digital standards. And I have to say, I don't know where Carly is, but I think I totally nicked that title from you at your presentation last year. And that's what you do at IWMW for the newbies, is just go away and take the ideas you've got and implement them where you are. We call them digital standards because that's so powerful to go and tell people we have digital standards. That kind of language, it's almost like you have a license. Anyway, so we introduced a Birkbeck house-style tone of voice guidelines, file management instructions, really incredibly important, image instructions, social media guidelines, our corporate identity guidelines. All of these things are now available to everyone. We are adding to them all the time as we add more in, but basically we're now directing everybody to these, and that's really important. Content improvements, this was really big. As a result of the research that Headscape did, we had a whole list of questions that students ask us at every stage of their customer journey. We never had this before, and so we were able to review our content and actually improve it in response to some of the things that came out because we realized the questions weren't answered. So for example, I guess you guys at other universities will have this, but we didn't have an information for parents page because previously it was the parents who studied with us. Well, we wrote that as a result of some of the questions. And in addition, we improved our content in response to the questions because we had a list of questions that we could answer for the first time. So we revisited our application enrollment information in light of student questions. It's not radical, it's not rocket science, but it's really important, and it has worked for us because we've had far fewer questions. User testing, this is something that we introduced as part of this process, and I really recommend it. We're very lucky at Birkbeck. We have someone who does our user testing. Standard part of all of our web redevelopment work. It's led to significant changes to our website. We have 2-stage improvements to search now. We've introduced remedial improvements to our current search, but it's still not ideal. But we've also commissioned Funnelback. I think a lot of universities here, we certainly have spoken to them, Funnelback to replace our site and core search because basically we're using Google Search Appliance, which is out of support and is about to fall over. So we are making massive improvements, and that will make sure that people find the information. Something else which is great from our point of view is that all developments, including content developments, we user test them before and after go live, and then we amend them once we go live. So nothing is set in stone. We're making improvements all the way along. This is really great. I think I got the idea last year from IWMW as well. Fix It Friday. So when we took permission away from all those 85 people who had access to our study skills information, we actually didn't give it back to them. But what we did is we introduced Fix It Friday, which is where we do routine maintenance. And so now, and we use that term quite deliberately, Fix It Friday, and all requests are put through our Yammer channel, and basically, if somebody wants some routine maintenance, we do it on Fridays, and then we let them know we've done it. And as a result of it, the number of complaints, the number of people who've asked to get access to our website that we actually don't want to have access to our website They've stopped asking because the work is being done and it's one less thing off their list. Content owners, we've rebranded as subject experts. Again, another IWMW win, I have to say. Subject experts is a really brilliant term. It means they have a role to play. It's just that we're not allowing them on the website. Yeah.
1 minute, Jane.
Okay. I think I've just got off this anyway. Have I? Okay. So that slide, okay, is that we use the techniques, which is CJM. We've now introduced that into our web development. So we do sort of a question and answer kind of format with content owners, subject experts, so that we actually try to get some information as to what questions do we need to answer when we redevelop part of the website. What next? We've launched stage 2. We're now working with schools and departments to improve their presence on the Birkbeck website. Wish us luck. And after that, stage 3 is the rest of the Birkbeck website. Then we have stage 4 and breathe, and we don't know what's going to happen in the future. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris and Jane. We have time for one quick question, I think. Do we have a question? Yep. If you can say your name and institution.
Hi Jane, Alex from the University of Bristol. What worked with student services, carrot or stick? Or combination?
Combination, to be honest. And the stick is basically Google. So we do threaten people with Google an awful lot. And the carrots are that we give them really great stats about the improvements that are happening. Is that are you asking about how we
Yeah,
get people
how did you manage to get them on side to reduce the content and to release the sort of the emotional attachment to all those thousands of pages?
We worked with them on redeveloping it, so we got their questions. I have to say it wasn't painless because we did have one person in one of our meetings shout at us at 9:30 in the morning, A, for having a meeting at 9:30 in the morning, B, for daring to give her post-it notes that she had to complete at that 9:30 in the morning. I mean, I guess that's a non-post-it note time for her. But basically then what we did is we just went back to them and we got them to approve it, and then we provided them with stats. But actually what we've done, which is mostly what has won them over, is we have made their amendments every Friday, every week since we went live with it, and we've let them know. So we always say we'll do it on Friday, and we've managed so far to do all the requests we get, with the exception of when we're at conferences like this, every Friday. So we get through the list. So I really recommend that.
Okay, well, thank you for that, and thank you for sharing your institutional story. And what I thought was really great was how you were building on stories that you'd heard from previous years. And I hope next year we'll be hearing about people who built on your story, because that's very much what we're about. Okay. So if we can thank Chris and Jane in a traditional way.